Welcome to the Main Dish with MD. I'm your host, Marlon Davis. And if this is your first episode of the show, the goal is to inspire, connect, and entertain. But before we get started, go ahead and click that subscribe button in the bottom. Where is it? Bottom right-hand corner of the screen, right there. Thank you. Today, we're going to talk about something a lot of people don't like to talk about. Tomorrow, we are going naked face, aka maskless, during this pandemic. So we're going to talk about a little touchy subject. We're going to talk about life after death. And we're not talking about Biggie's album with the hot tracks, Hypnotize, What's Beef, Mo Money, Mo Problems. Take that. But we're going to talk about, are you financially prepared for you and your family? There are two things that are certain in life: death and taxes. And I know y'all going to pay them taxes, or y'all filling out those tax forms in the next couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and get prepared for death as well. Today, I'm bringing along two experts to help me address this issue. First, we have Paul Brown. Paul is a financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're proud to have you, brother. And thank you for talking about this serious issue that we all need to learn about.
100%.
Next, I have Stan Stackhouse, a global life and AIL sales agent. Welcome, Stan.
Hey, thanks for having me, MD.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming out, taking your time out to really just to get to the people.
Yeah,
and that's what we want
here
to talk about and help the people out today. But before we get started, we're going to break into a segment of the show called WTD, What the Dish. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and list off some ingredients to a recipe. Once you know that dish, just go ahead and say it out loud. But let's go ahead and get started. 2 cups of cubed crustless bread, 2 garlic cloves, salt and pepper, 2 pounds of ripe tomatoes, preferably beefsteak tomatoes, 1 4-inch piece of English cucumber, 1 inch thick slice of green bell pepper, 2 teaspoons of red wine vinegar, 1 teaspoon of sherry vinegar, 1 cup extra virgin olive oil. What do we have?
Pasta sauce?
What was that?
I said pasta sauce?
No. This is a tough one. I was like, I might stop the people on this one.
I
Stan, you got anything?
no idea.
Oh,
I have
because
no
you guys have
idea.
been focusing on trying to sell people life insurance. That's Martha Stewart's recipe for gazpacho.
Gazpacho.
I see your face.
I've
I see your
never
face,
had
Paul.
gazpacho.
I see your face, Paul. I
Bet
see
you
your
can't
face.
spell
Huh?
It was the breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs threw me off.
Is that
Yeah, I was about
what it was? Otherwise than that, you would have had it.
Yeah, everything else I would have had it.
Yeah, the breadcrumbs threw me off too. Sure.
All right, gentlemen, no one likes to talk about life insurance, but we're going to talk about it today. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of COVID. So my first question is, has the life insurance industry picked up during this pandemic? Paul?
Yeah. In short, yes, it definitely has, for a few reasons. One, as you mentioned in the lead up, people don't like to talk about insurance, life insurance specifically, but they love to talk about it when things happen. And, unfortunately, during COVID, people's loved ones have passed away. And it's not because they're old. It's not because of car wrecks. It's things that you didn't predict. And people tend to want to have these types of discussions when things go wrong. But that sometimes just going to be a little too late. But I've had a lot more inquiries and dialogues over the last year, mainly because people were seeing what was happening 1 degree away from them, 2 degrees away from them. And, eventually you get tired of seeing GoFundMes every other day on Facebook or IG or wherever it's going to be. And so, yes, in short, yes.
Stan, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. Just to piggyback off what Paul said, I mean, you've definitely seen an increase. One of the things that when I talk to a lot of different clients, one of the things that they say is like they always reminisce on something that's happened this year, potentially, or last year when somebody in their family passed away and they saw how maybe their affairs weren't in order in a proper manner. So they're just like, hey, I don't want this to happen to me. So yeah, you're definitely seeing it because most of the time when people start thinking about life insurance is due to situations where they've lost someone or they've seen something happen in somebody's life and they realize that, it's time for me to get my affairs in order.
Well, we've all seen it. We've all seen, well, let me rephrase that. I've seen it a lot. And Paul, you mentioned GoFundMe's, but growing up, it was always like such and so died. Hey, can you call cousin Pete and see if he can chip in on the funeral? Or auntie from California, can she put something on the funeral, or what's going on? So a lot of us are ill prepared for what I mentioned earlier is a certain thing in life, death. Yeah. So, a lot of people have work life insurance or life insurance from work. Why should people get extra life insurance, or what are the benefits of having both?
I'd say having the insurance through work is definitely something that you want to have. Typically, the insurance that you have at work is probably like a term type policy. So it's going to allow you to get a large amount of coverage for a small fee. Your premium is not going to be that much. But the most important thing is I think that there's a good way to have a combination of both whole life and term life, and having extra coverage that's outside of work is very important because at some point you may lose that job. And at that point, that coverage that you have at work, you no longer have it. So it's always a good idea to have something that you can control, whether it be a term policy or a whole life policy or something of that nature. What about you, Paul? What do you think?
So I'll piggyback on one word that he brought up in there, control, right? And so generally when you're working with a big company, corporate, whatever, big Fortune 5, wherever you work, your benefits are selected by the board and HR, right? And ultimately what you have as an employee is the ability to decide between these options provided. So these options provided doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you need. It means that that is what you're selecting between. And so, and like Stanley mentioned, you could leave that job. But on the other side of that, and this came a lot to fruition back in 2008 and 2009, when companies were losing money, hemorrhaging money from what was going on in the recession, they kind of got to different points where it's like, hey, we're going to either cut jobs or we got to cut some of the benefits. But one way or the other, expenses need to go down. And so when you start seeing a change in benefits, well, you don't have any true control over what they do or what they don't do. All you get is what option you decide. And so my conversation with clients and prospects is just, hey, do you want control or do you just want to check a box, right? And design it for what you want it to be able to do. And wherever you move, be it a different state, be it a different job, you ultimately have the say-so on what happens or what does not happen within your policy. It's great to have what you have at work. And another point is your work policies tend to be limited on how much you need, right? 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. In theory, that sounds like a lot, but they may not be the amount that you need. And if I'm stopping at 4, but I really needed 15, right, then I need to complement that some kind of way. And if I can't get it here, well, then that leaves me the private sector or outside insurance in order to complement what I have at work. And in some instances, replace it all in its entirety, if that makes sense for where you are.
Right.
So Stan mentioned a couple of different types of life insurance. And I think those were the main, you said whole life insurance, term life insurance, any other of the, I'm sure there's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot. But what are those 2 the major ones? Is there any other major ones that?
I'd probably throw universal life in there as an iteration of permanent insurance, but it has a whole sector of things that happen under it that are different from traditional whole life. So those are probably your big 3: term, whole life, and universal.
Yeah.
Let's break those down real quick of what each of those mean for the people, and the benefits of having one versus the other, or both, or all. Paul, go ahead, since you were on that.
Yeah. So in those three bases, you have term, permanent, whole life, and universal term. Think about it as an if something happens during this time frame, I will have coverage, right? And so a lot of times I like to compare it to renting an apartment, right? While I have this lease, I have a roof over my head. But once my lease is up, that's it. Congratulations, you lived here. It was great. Maybe they have cookies at the front, on your way out, but that policy no longer exists, right? And so same in term, you have a term product that goes 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever. There's different ranges based on what you're trying to do. But once that term is up, that's it. Congratulations, you're still alive. But that benefit no longer exists. That policy has since expired, right? Permanent whole life takes you on the other side of it, where it's more of a win. When I pass, when my time is called, eventually it's going to come out. You could be 80, you could be 180. Eventually it's going to come out, right? Because all of our times are limited.
Death and taxes. Death and
taxes, guaranteed. And so permanent, you have a structure where I have a policy that I'm paying premiums on that's going to tend to be a little higher, right? And so to stay in true to the renting an apartment, like buying a house, right? In a utopia situation, houses tend to cost more than apartments. Right now, obviously, we can go to different parts of the country, San Francisco, New York, where that flips in its entirety. But generally, your homes tend to cost more than your apartments. And so I have this home that I have for life that I'm paying on. And you have different structures where I pay for life. I could pay to the age of 65. I could pay for 20 years. But once I've paid my designated time period, I own the policy outright to do with as I please, right? And over time, depending on the design of the policy, all companies, everybody has different designs, but over time you develop generally some accumulated value within that product that looks more like a living benefit, and probably would be something that we talk about more because that's a whole nother outflow of information, but it's something that will come out. Right. And each of them have their own purposes. And a lot of times you see people have both of them. In my experience, and I'll kick it over to Stan as well. In my experience, I don't have anybody over 60 saying they want to get rid of their insurance. Right. None of my clients over that age are like, yeah, we don't need it anymore. They may be making adjustments to how much they have, but nobody wants to die with zero. And so just in that mindset, right, there's different spaces for all those needs. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, man. Those differences between the terms and the wholes, like you said, a good combination. I always recommend, especially depending on your financial situation with your assets and your liabilities during different stages of your age. You may want to transition from a more of a term to a whole at some point. So there's always a good combination of term and whole, that you can always have as you progress into your older age, because once you get towards like he says, once you get older, you probably gravitate toward more of a whole life type situation, just because your assets and your liabilities have lessened for you at that point. When you're younger with houses and kids and college tuitions and things that you want to pay, term fits you a lot better just because of the price for the amount of coverage that you get.
So let's break it down for the people. I mean, y'all not talking high level, but y'all talking, maybe. I promise you, this is the first time a lot of people are talking about life insurance. I promise you.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example and see if this makes sense.
Okay.
So I have two young kids. Say something happens to me. I don't want anything to happen to me, but for some ungodly reason, something happens to me, 5 years from now. If I have term life insurance for 15 years,
mm-hmm.
So if something happens to me in 5 years, that means my kids are going to be taken care of, and mom doesn't have to struggle. She doesn't have to go get a GoFundMe. Well, maybe she does if she just wants to a little extra.
Right.
But she don't have to call cousin Pete, auntie in California, to send money because she is taken care of. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had enough coverage. I think a lot of times people treat life insurance as like a checkbox, not necessarily something that should be reviewed. And so they say, well, I have it and that's enough. But they don't account for, well, what do you need? Like in your example, if something were to happen, and we don't want to really put that out in the universe, but if things happen,
we don't. Look, what
right.
Knock on some wood back
there. Right. But what do I want to happen? What do I want to happen after me? That's the dialogue, right? Do I want my spouse not to have to go back to work? Do I want the house to be paid for? Do I want to set aside money for college education? What do I want these things to do? And having that dialogue, coming to a recognition that $100,000 probably isn't going to be enough.
No. Yeah.
Right. Because it's one of those.
Not the way my wife liked to shop. Right. 6 months.
Right. And so I think in insurance, you're going to naturally hear big numbers, right, when you hear a death benefit. But I think the disconnect sometimes is people make the assumption like it's the lottery, like I get this and I'm going to spend it all right now. And no, when you design things the right way, this big number is supposed to last your family or whomever 20 years, 25 years, 50 years, whatever that time frame is supposed to be. And then when you hear a number like 3 million, right, it doesn't mean the same. If the three of us had $3 million on the table right now, we could go have a blast, right? But if I said, make this last until 2050.
Come on, Keith Sweat, make it last
forever, right? Yeah. Make this last for 30 years. Well, that $3 million doesn't have the same weight that it did as a one-time have at it. And that's, I think, a disconnect that people have when they see these big numbers, right? Yeah. You see 500,000, you're like, they'll be good. They'll be good. Discounting the fact that you're going to make that over the next 4.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like with your example, like you were saying, say you had $100,000 in coverage. One thing people don't realize, like Paul was saying, is your money gets spent fast. If you have $100,000 in term life, say you make $75,000 a year, that's 1 year of income replacement for your wife. House isn't paid for, bills are still getting paid. That's why you need to have different types of protections, because she still has to pay for any kind of funeral services. You got college tuitions, you got all this other stuff that's going to continue to come up, that your $100,000, which you might have thought was a lot of money, that's gone probably year 1, No,
it's gone. It's gone in 6 months.
Yeah,
it's not less.
6 months. It's the money gets spent up really fast when things happen because you don't really think about it. But that income has to go to a burial probably, and then the day-to-day operations of the house, rents or mortgages. Just all of that stuff is taken into account. And that, like you said, that money just 6 months, it could be gone. Yeah.
So what we gonna talk about it. So if you love your wife and you love your kids,
yep.
You love your wife and you love your kids. If you go to work every day to provide for your family, if you like to see them have not necessarily the finer things,
but good things,
good things, or things.
Period. Yeah.
If you want to have your family not have an extra level of stress on them after you've passed, get you some life insurance. That's what I'm hearing. If you want to
add to it, MD, get you the right amount.
Of life
insurance. Okay. Get you the right amount of life insurance. Mm-hmm. So what's the demographic of your clients? Who's getting life insurance? Who needs to be more educated on life insurance?
For me, I'll say demographic wise, it's usually people who are much older, in their late 50s and 60s and 70s. And one of the things that when I started doing this, one of my main objectives was to get to people at an earlier age and start talking to them. When you're in your 30s and your 40s and you're starting to get a family, that's when you really need to be trying to lock in, especially like whole life and different things, because a lot of the people that I see, they're much older and they're having to pay much higher prices for the insurance that they're getting, the coverage that they're getting. And sometimes they're not able to get the amount that they probably feel like they need to have to be able to take care of, leave something for the grandkids and things like that, just because they've waited so long to get it. I mean, I think there should be some kind of push, and I don't know about you, Paul, but I think that definitely needs to be a push for people at a younger age to start really just considering it, especially as you start to, have a family and stuff, to get insurance and start protecting your assets and your legacy, because that's when you're probably your most vulnerable from a standpoint of the value or that you need to be trying to get to be able to pay for the things that are going to be necessary in the future for the people you leave behind.
Yeah. And so this is where I probably differ a little bit, not negatively. I started in this industry when I was 22, right? Straight out of college. And so that didn't put me automatically in front of the 50-year-old VP, right? It put me around people that I knew, 24, 25, 26. And in that time, my philosophy evolved and changed. I mean, I unequivocally think every single person should have life insurance. And what I mean by that is, I don't wait until people are wanting to get or starting families. I don't wait until you get married. I'm not waiting until you have kids. I want to prepare for who you're going to be, right? And so, flashback MD, 24, 25, fresh out of college, living it up in Austin. Life insurance was the last thing. Like, absolutely the last thing. It might even be after the last thing that popped up on your head. Right. But it's like, I want to prepare for who you're going to be, because a few things in insurance are always going to be true. The older you get, the more expensive it goes. Mm-hmm. And the older you get, sometimes the worse our health becomes, right? I don't know about y'all, but me out of college was a few pounds lighter, right? Health was a little better.
It's because your hair.
It's because of the hair, right? It's just because of your hair. Right? Yeah. Everything else is right and tight, right?
Yeah.
But things change, right? And we keep waiting for that point where, like, it makes sense. It makes sense when you're healthy, when you're young and you're healthy. And so my practice was built a lot in the single market at the inception. And since then, people have gotten married and had kids, and we developed things and we've grown things. But on the same side of that, I also have people that bought and now are married, having kids, and things have changed in their health. They can't get anymore. Right. And these people are 32, 33, and all they have is literally what we did when they were 25. Right. Which is still a blessing. Right. We're not stuck with zero. But what they have there is all that they probably will ever be able to get.
Right. Yeah. Right. We're always one doctor visit away from uninsurability.
Life doesn't discriminate. Right. And, I think because of that, my you asked about the demographic of our practices. My demographic, my average client age is probably mid to high 30s, right? Majority Black, probably 60 to 75% Black. And then the rest mixed, right? White, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. But they're younger, because I decided very early on we needed to have these conversations now. And not wait for this point, because all that's going to happen is you're going to get to a certain point and say, yeah, now's the time, and be mad at me because it costs 4 times more to do it. I told you weren't getting younger, right? It's just not, it's not possible.
So let me ask you this. You guys mentioned age, health, all those things. So if somebody had the coronavirus, the COVID, could that potentially change your health 100%. Policy?
Yeah, 100%. Right now, I don't know about with you guys, but right now, if with the people that we work with, if you have coronavirus or you've been diagnosed, you've got to probably a 6 to 12 month kind of wait period before you can. If you don't have insurance, you have to wait at least 6 to 12 months before you can get insured.
Just think about it, MD.
Well, it's a cold world out there.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to let the people know.
Yeah.
It's a cold world.
Insurance is about certainty.
Right.
From their side, from the insurance company side. It's about certainty. So anything that brings in uncertainty is not going to look positive to them. Mm-hmm. none of us on here are physicians. None of us are researchers and scientists, but we can tell that they don't know everything about COVID, right? They know some things, but they don't know everything. And that level of uncertainty is never going to be positive for industries or companies that work in certainty.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, you got it. They may want to know something. They're like, well, let's see what happens.
Exactly.
Let's see. Right.
Yeah.
We can't tell you that this is the flu, right, just yet, but we want to see what this means for you before we bring, or they're going to charge you a whole bunch to do it. One of the two.
Yeah, especially with a lot of the stuff that's coming out now that is leaving like long-term like organ damage and, you know, like lung damage, heart damage and stuff like that. That's just you're entering into a risk contract, you know, basically, you know, and the companies aren't willing to take on all that risk, you know, especially like you said.
Unless you pay a price.
Right. Unless you pay a price. Yeah. There's always a price.
It's always a price.
More money or less money or bad health, more problems. I don't know. Some of that fits in there somewhere.
Right.
It flips. It's more problems, more money. It flips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There it is. More problems, more money, life insurance. Come holler at us.
Right.
So a lot of people are skeptical about getting life insurance, or why are people skeptical about life insurance? Is it the knowledge, the finances? Is it a combination? Talk to me.
I'd say it's probably financial, and then it's probably, I don't know, probably like a perception of who insurance agents are sometimes. Like for me, my goal isn't to sell you something that you don't need. I'm not going to look at you and say, I know what you can afford. We're going to get you the most we can get. I'm going to look at you, evaluate your situation. Like you said, evaluate what you want to be in the future. And we're going to take your current coverage and we're going to try to fill any gaps and holes that we can kind of fill. You know, financially, I think a lot of people, they feel like, oh man, life insurance is expensive, you know, or I get clients that tell me all the time, they're like, well, I feel like life insurance is a scam because I may never use it. First of all, you're going to use it. It's going to get used, number one.
Death
and taxes. It's going to get used. So the question is, it's like financially, do you want to do this? You know, but if you think about it, most of the time, if you cut out 1 or 2 dinners out, cut out a couple of 6th Street trips, that pays for your policy for the month. You know, life insurance, it can get as expensive as you want it, but typically the amount of premiums that people pay to protect their families, they're not breaking the bank to be able to do it. You just got to sit down with the right agent and get the policy that's best suited for you and your family.
So I want to take Stanley's comment back in time and be completely transparent and historical, right? There's a sector of this population of the world or of this country, Black folks, that's experience with life insurance is different than a lot of other cultures in the United States of America, right? Anybody of a certain age either has experience or is 1, maybe 2 generations away from the insurance man is going to come collect the money on Friday, right? And it doesn't take you can ask a parent and maybe a grandparent. It's not going to take you that long to get to somebody that knows about that being how things went. Mm-hmm. They came to knock on the door on Friday to collect the premium for the policy, right? And then it can even go left where some of these people, as Stanley was talking about, some of these agents back in the day, some of these companies didn't operate in a very high integrity environment. And you have stories of people fighting with insurance companies about a claim. It's like, they died, it should be paid. I don't disagree, but that's not how things went back then, right? Or paying a lot of money for $5,000. Mm-hmm. Right? You know, so-and-so been paying X amount of dollars for 45 years and they only got $5,000, right? That's not an industry thing. That was that specific contract or that specific agent that wasn't operating in your best interest. But that's a lot of our people's experience with insurance, right? And so when Stanley and I and our colleagues come in to have these dialogues, that's their first experience, and none of it's really positive, right? And so it's one of those things that sucks, but it's like sometimes you got to see things go right before you believe that it works. But what you have to see go right for this specific dialogue is not fun, right? Somebody has to die, premiums have to come out, or the death benefit has to come out, and you have to see it checking off some boxes. But that's not really what the Black experience has been. It covered a little bit of the funeral, or they were paying on it for so long. It's been stories that aren't necessarily positive, and that has not been helpful here over the last 25 years in the Black population's accumulation of life insurance, or of good life insurance, the accumulation of good life insurance contracts that will do all the things that we're talking about and all the things that that it should do. That's been missed for a while.
So people are saying getting life insurance is a good investment for the wealth of your family. What do they mean when they say that? I've heard that a couple of times.
So
go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. So life insurance is one. Let's talk about a few things, right? We keep bringing up the guarantees in life, right? Death and taxes. Life insurance, death benefit proceeds are tax-free, right? They flow down to your beneficiaries tax-free. It's one of the few things that exists in our tax code that literally is tax-free, right? And so when you think about what you're able to do with life insurance, or how you can structure life insurance, right? And this is what I tell my clients. And this is how, one of the core philosophies of how my practice operates is my goal, and what I want to build for you and how I'm doing it with my family is to affect generations that I'll never meet.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. And so if I'm able to put together, just from my life insurance, right, aside from what I invest in my 401k, I want to do those as well. They matter. But from a life insurance stance, if I'm able to have an amount of money flow down that, and think about it sometimes as it relates to some of our peers, if I build something to a situation where my great grandkids and great grandkids college is already paid for because of what I did in 2020, and by the time they get to 2090 or wherever that's going to be, their college is already paid for, what position does that put those kids in coming out of college, right? No loans, right? First job, they're not paying X amount in loans. They're not dealing with that. Well, what could they do with that money that they're not spending on student loans?
Because Paw made a plan for him.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Paw made a plan for Paw Brown.
Yeah, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? I remember one of my, and I'll kick it back to Stan. I know he has some comments in this area as well. One of my aha moments, I got in when I was young and was still kind of learning how all this worked and where it could be impactful. And I had some friends of a different persuasion, right? Grew up in a different sector of Dallas than I did, but they were buying a house in Lakewood, which was one of my favorite neighborhoods in Dallas. If you're familiar with Dallas, you know where Lakewood is. And they were making less than me at the time, right? And I couldn't figure out how they were affording this kind of house. I knew I couldn't, right? And I didn't have any student loans. And I'm like, how are they affording this house? Come to find out, great grandmother basically said for them, she had built this whole situation that was created through life insurance, that when a grandkid or great grandkid, when they got married, every single person got $50,000 to put a down payment on a home.
Yeah.
Right. So think about that, right? They're putting $50,000 down on a house in Lakewood. And this is circa 2010, right? But they can afford because of this down payment. But then what do? They come back and sell it to me 7 years later for $250,000 more. Right. They didn't really put any money into it. It was the $50,000 that was gifted to them that started this process that now netted them $250,000, right? That I am now having to pay because they were there 7 years before, not because they did a better job, not because they saved better, not because they knew the right mortgage lender. It's because something that was done 60 years before them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That happens every day.
Yeah, that generational wealth thing is kind of like one of the most important pieces to like, I feel like one of the most important pieces to like life insurance, just because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So when granddad or grandma passed away, and like a lot of our situations, like we were talking about, we passed the hat for them. We had to pay to get them buried. So then what does that do? So that means that mama got to come up with 2,000, your brother got to come up with 2,000. So we're in a sense giving up the money that we're saving for these type of situations, as opposed to having it set up in a kind of a reverse where, oh, when this happens to me, I want to be the one we're going to benefit. It's a death benefit. Somebody's going to benefit off of this, as opposed to it being a kind of a liability for me to pass away, and that's where the investment comes in at, is we have to be putting ourselves in a position to, like you say, generation after generation, giving our children and our generations a head start that we didn't get. Like he said, I mean, how good would it have been to have $50,000 to go get a house, no student loans or whatever you do, just to be able to have that head start. So you're not putting yourself in debt. Everything that you do, like you said, it's a profit,
Papa was a rolling, right? That song, like the lyrics of that song, it make, and when he died,
oh,
he
he
left
us
right? He didn't make those lyrics up. Yeah, he didn't make that up because it rhymed, right? It was real life.
Hey, mama.
Right.
Oh man. Hey, first of all, Stan, how can the people reach out to you, get in contact with you, talk a little bit more? We just scratched the surface of the possibilities today, touching on a subject that people don't want to talk about. But how can people get in contact with you? Give us your details.
Okay, so you can just contact me directly through my personal email, stanley.stackhouse@gmail.com. Or you can give me a call, 832-714-1596. That's my direct line. I'm always willing to work with people. I had a lady call me last night at 9:00, or it's like 10:00 my time. And she was like, how long do you work? I said, man, when it comes to protecting families, I'll work all night. Like, that's my good job. If you call and you say you need insurance or you want to have a conversation about some things, that's my job, is to keep you protected. So I'm always working. I mean, just like I know Paul probably the same way, man. It doesn't stop, man. It's just always something going on. People have questions. And, so just reaching out just for educational purposes is always a good thing too. That's my goal, is to educate people and to not only to get them covered, but just so they can understand the policies they have at work. Because a lot of times it's just about, a lot of people, they just pay a bill, but they don't fully understand exactly what happens. So when something does happen to them, everybody's looking like, well, daddy had a policy somewhere, and, they don't understand exactly what's going on. So that's the most important thing. Understand your policies, and, just reach out to me at any point.
Paul
Brown, how can people get in contact with you?
Yep. So my direct office email, paul.brown@nm.com, Nancy Mary, nm.com. Direct office line is 817-347-9167. If I don't answer, it's probably because I'm talking to somebody, but I return phone calls, I return emails. But yeah, I'm here. I love to educate. I love to see people kind of improving their situation, along with everything else. But, give me a buzz. Let's talk it up. Let's see where you are, what you're trying to do. What I would tell you, though, whether you call me, whether you call Stanley, whether you call Marlon to get another name, whether you got a friend or family, approach those conversations open, right? Don't just go into it saying, oh, hey, Stanley, all I need is $100,000. No, like, approach it with an open dialogue so you can actually get to a point of resolution versus checking a box.
Right.
So I want to say this, man. I'm reaching out to the people out there. If you care about your spouse, if you have kids and you care about your kids, if you care about your kids, and I know grandmas and grandpas, y'all love to buy gifts and when you see the grandkids, think about what you can do for them financially when you're gone and your kids are gone, generation after generation. Let's get away from the need of the GoFundMe. Now you can still GoFundMe if you want to, but let's take the stress from your family, and let's take care of them. Let's have those discussions. Go talk to Paul, go talk to Stanley, go talk to anyone you know. But I wanted to touch on this subject today because, again, tomorrow we are going naked face. So it's going to be a lot of things going out there. And let's have these conversations before you're put on 6-month, 1-year probation before you can actually get life insurance. Let's do it now. But fellas, before we leave, let's go ahead and get to our fun part of the show called This or That. All right. Guys, Doritos or Cheetos?
Cheetos.
Doritos.
Paul said.
Yeah, without question. Orange fingers and everything. Yeah.
Flaming hot Cheetos, huh?
That's high school there. That's high school. I'm too old for that. That burns the chest now. I got the regular ones. Baked if you have them.
Dill pickles or sour pickles?
Deal.
Stan?
Deal.
Lemonade or tea?
Combination, baby. Give me that Arnold Palmer, man. Let me mix that thing up, man.
Definitely got to be a combo.
How did I know at least one of y'all was going to say combination?
Go and mix it up. Make sure it's sweet tea, too.
Popcorn or candy at the movie theater?
Candy.
Popcorn. I'm a
Popcorn. The big bucket.
Oh, yeah. Popcorn, and you got to get the big drink. You know, it's going to cost you $60, but hey.
Yeah.
It costs you 3 times the movie.
Right.
A peppermint round or a peppermint stick?
Round.
You know, the kind that your grandma had or your mom had in the purse in church when you needed something. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to quietly open it during service.
Quietly open it. Be discreet. You know, peppermint stick, everybody know your business.
Right.
I feel like that's only for like Christmas. Like that's the only time the peppermint stick should come out.
Right.
Marlon, you know you should have called it a candy cane.
Well, you know what? Watch this. I wasn't gonna call it a candy cane intentionally. I wasn't gonna call it a candy cane. And you know why. Salt and pepper or sugar on grits?
Salt and pepper, man. If you put sugar on your grits, something wrong with you.
Salt and pepper. Yeah.
I'm going to have to actually not publish this show for both of those answers.
Now look, I am not opposed to sugar, but my preference is.
You better put some sugar and butter on them grits.
Sugar
butter. Yeah, butter all day
long on grits, bro.
Butter too. Yeah. Mix it in the eggs.
Maybe salt and pepper helps out with your life insurance terms.
There's probably some hidden facts that's true in that one.
Right.
Because you got less sugars in there.
The sugars, yeah.
Oh, fellas, I appreciate y'all coming out. Please remember to promote, support, and encourage your friends. And it's more fun when the homies have some. Peace.
Peace out, man. Have a good one.